When Ed was sitting in front of him, Principal Abel said that he had read all the investigation reports. He felt like he had been through a lot of hard things. Principal Abel sighed for a moment. While pouring his tea, he said that he did not expect him to have this kind of accident. On behalf of the academy, he sincerely apologized to him for their lack of security management. Hearing that, Ed said that it was unnecessary. He did not blame him. The opponent was thorough and prepared, so he doubted that this problem could be solved even if the academy had prepared precautions in advance. Hearing that, Principal Abel said that he appreciated his words, but, after drinking his tea in one gulp, he said that he was curious. What was the real truth behind it? Everything seemed to have been arranged in such a way. Ed was just silent while drinking his tea. Principal Abel continued, judging from the timeline. You seem to be waiting for Caden and Knox to escape first, and once the mastermind who wanted to make you die received news, then you felt safe to appear in public. Principal Abel paused for a moment. He then took out several files. He didn't really know about how the intel conflicts in a noble family like the Roth-Taylor family worked, nor did he have any intention of digging deep into it. However, he was the one who managed this academy. Any incident that happened within the academy had to be reported to the imperial court. If he reported that he was still alive, then the Roth-Taylor family, one of the key factions in the empire, would definitely know of his existence, and likely, not in a way that he wanted. Ed also seemed to realize that and was a bit dizzy on how to solve it. He then asked if the reporting could be postponed for a while. Principal Abel did not immediately refuse and asked him, "Is there any reason to take that risk?" Ed explained, "As you may have guessed, the person who ordered that I be killed is none other than my own father, Crefin Roth-Taylor, the patriarch of the Roth-Taylor family as well as the real power holder in the imperial court." But, Principal Abel calmly said that the affairs outside the academy have nothing to do with him. His words really silenced Ed, but Ed did not give up so easily. He tried to convince him again. Even the Roth-Taylor family, a key force in the imperial court, would prefer for things to pass quietly without any news. If it becomes a problem later, you can report it then. What risk is there? Hearing that, Principal Abel then called his name. While flipping through the file in his hand, he said that he had heard about his academic performance that was improving rapidly, besides that his good reputation among students had also undergone an almost unbelievable turnaround. His sister, Tanya, also had a promising future. He also seemed to be highly valued by the top-ranked students, as if he had turned into a completely different person. Ed's body seemed to freeze after hearing his words. He was really surprised to hear that, but, after reading the files in his hand, Principal Abel said that he had previously said that Sylvania Academy always stand on the side of its students, especially talented students like him. He didn't think he needed to explain it further. With a friendly smile, Principal Abel then extended his hand and said goodbye. He said that he would remember his name well. The whole conversation with Principal Abel made Ed realize that he seemed to have understood the whole situation. Even so, he still chose to close his eyes. It made Ed finally be able to breathe a sigh of relief, because thanks to that the fact that he was still alive would not leak out. After a while passed, after Ed finished his business with Principal Abel, in front of the royal family dormitory, when a male student came there with a gift, Kylie, who was guarding there, then stopped him. She said to the male student that today it was time for Tanya to rest, so she asked him not to bother her. She also did not accept inappropriate gifts. She asked him if he understood. The male student was then disappointed to hear that, and he then could only walk away from there with a feeling of disappointment. Seeing that, Ed wondered if it was okay for people like her to do things like that, when she was a saintess, but his attention was then immediately distracted when someone walked up to him. It was Tanya. She said that she was initially surprised when she heard he was called by the principal. Seeing her, Ed asked, "From what I heard, this year's student council president election, they said that you are certain to win." He then congratulated his sister. It seemed that her time to shine had come, although the excitement could not be hidden on Tanya's face, but she still said that she still could not let her guard down. After Ed's appearance on stage, Tanya had already been proven innocent. Out of the 12 top-ranked students from each faculty, 8 had expressed their support for her. In addition to the fact that most of the top-ranked students were on her side, the real reason why Tanya was able to secure this lead was because of the fall of Lortel. Lortel incessantly portrayed the student council president election as a one-on-one battle between her and Tanya. As a result, everyone forgot about the minor candidates. This rivalry then became a face-to-face contest between Lortel and Tanya, and just as their approval ratings reached a critical balance, suddenly, shocking news came. There were reports of Lortel embezzling funds from the Merchant Association and exploiting her business partner. Out of shame, she was eventually forced to resign, with Lortel having been eliminated from the competition. Now only Tanya's supporters remained. As Ed was recollecting what had happened in the past few days, Tanya sat down beside him and said, "Lately, when I kept taking care of the election, and you were busy with the investigation, the two of us rarely got a chance to talk. In the future I'm sure we will have many opportunities, but first I want to say something." Hearing that, Ed seemed to be able to foresee what she wanted to say. He said that he had said "you're welcome" repeatedly. Tanya seemed to be very grateful to him for what he had done at that time, but Tanya immediately said that that was not what she wanted to say. While feeling a little embarrassed, Tanya then called him. She said that this question might sound a little cruel, and honestly she was also confused about whether to ask this, but she couldn't hold it, so she asked if she could ask him something. At that time, during the speech session, why were you willing to support me to that extent, even to the point of being willing to announce to the public that you would take my side? If you really intend to stay hidden, you shouldn't have to risk yourself to come out of hiding. Somehow, it feels as if you can't bear to see me suffer from injustice. That's what I feel. Hearing that, Ed looked a little hesitant in answering his question. He then answered yes. It was like that. His answer seemed to get a big reaction from Tanya. She seemed to be very happy about it. While smiling at him, Ed said that they were family, so, of course he would take her side. Tanya smiled happily. Her face looked very relieved when she heard that. Tanya then said since she was now the student council president, that meant she had to act as a student council president should, but maybe, she would be a bit biased. After all, she was also a human being. Tanya then stood up from her chair. She said if he had any problems, she asked him to just tell her. She would help him as much as she could. After saying that, Tanya then walked away from there. Ed smiled as he watched her leave, but his attention was then immediately distracted when he heard someone repeating his words earlier. It was Lortel. Lortel said that she was a bit jealous when she heard the word family. Seeing her, Ed then asked her since when she was standing there. With a small smile, Lortel replied, since Senior said embarrassing things to Tanya. Putting that aside, Ed said that lately the news about her was hot. He worriedly asked if she was okay. Lortel was silent for a moment. Hearing that, with a brilliant smile, she said of course it was fine. Everything went according to plan. The scandal that secured Tanya's victory, the case of her embezzling Merchant Association funds, and the news of her mistreatment of her business partner. In fact, it was news that Lortel had deliberately leaked. Lortel had from the beginning arranged a one-on-one competition with Tanya to erase the presence of other candidates. When Lortel sought out Princess Phinia to openly show her hostility to Tanya, all that was her plan to pressure Tanya to participate in the student council president election. Tanya and Princess Phinia were both burdened by her death, and once he appeared, obviously they will support him to atone for their sins. As for himself, at that time, when Lortel came to meet him in his hiding place, and asked him to hug her, Lortel already had a feeling that she would make a lot of enemies soon, even if it meant turning the whole academy against her. At least, she wanted him to stay by her side. Ed had already made the decision to save Tanya when he found out about Lortel's plan. His duel with Zix helped him remove the remaining doubts that were in him. When he told Tanya that saving her was because they were family, he wasn't lying, but it would be a lie if he didn't consider Tanya's usefulness in the future. Act 4 was a fight against the Roth-Taylor family, and he was already their enemy, and as a family insider, Tanya would be the perfect connection for gathering intelligence and misdirection strategies. But Ed wouldn't talk about his plan to just anyone. Only people who really understood dark affairs needed to know about it. For example, like a girl who has spent her whole life calculating profit and loss. While Ed was thinking about her, Lortel said that her bad image in the academy had been increasing recently. Tanya also didn't seem to look at her well, so for now, she would leave everything to him. Hearing that, Ed then said to her that she had some kind of bad habit, the habit of manipulating people around her like a chessboard. Lortel just laughed at that. She said that she was also helpless about that. That was the risk of the job. Sometimes even she herself was played. Ed was silent for a moment. Hearing that, he then once again asked her if she was really okay. Lortel suddenly stopped walking when she heard that. With a small smile, Lortel suddenly hugged his hand. She said that the rumors could not take away her money. so there was no point in thinking about it. She was also aware that she was naturally suited to be a villain. As long as she did not turn him into her enemy, Lortel smiled sweetly at him when she said that. That fact also seemed to make Lortel willing to play this role even though it made her hated by the majority of people in the academy. Human relationships always have hidden layers, that's why understanding someone's true intentions is difficult. With Princess Phinia rejecting the role of student council president, her next step is uncertain. And the power struggle between the Imperial faction and the Roth-Taylor family, no one knows what it will become. As for the development of the remaining acts, it has become something that Ed himself does not know for sure what it will become. After parting with Lortel, Ed then entered the northern forest and headed somewhere. After a long journey, he then finally arrived at the place he was aiming for. It was the cabin he had painstakingly built and occupied. It had been a month since he left the cabin. He felt strange when he returned here after so long. He even felt a little touched, but Ed realized that there were several things he had to do immediately. In order to keep the cabin tidy, he had to clean up the campfire area again. Then, in this cabin that was left in a mess, when Ed went inside and checked the cabin, he was then surprised when he heard someone snoring. He also saw a witch hat lying next to the person. That person was of course Lucy. She slept so soundly on the bed while hugging a pillow. Lucy seemed to sleep so soundly that his presence was not enough to wake her up. Ed couldn't help but laugh at that. He seemed to be quite nostalgic about it. Ed decided not to wake her up. He then took a book on the shelf in the cabin. The books were left long enough to make dust accumulate on them. While sitting on the chair next to the bed, Ed then continued to read the book. But not long after he read the book, he suddenly thought, for now, he should rest first. He was quite relieved by the fact that he finally returned to the cabin. And Ed then closed his eyes and fell asleep with Lucy. When the sun appeared in the sky and chased away the darkness brought by the night, the news of Tanya's election as student council president reached him 3 days later. In the professor's building, in the office of one of the professors, Janica was invited to come there. The professor seemed to ask her to supervise some kind of assessment which made Janica hesitate. The professor was the senior professor of spirit studies, Melina. Seeing her hesitation, Professor Melina then reassured her and said that she would give her extra points later. Of course she was aware that her academic field was still difficult when compared to professors, but at her current age she could already handle high-ranking spirits freely. When it came to raw instinct, among the spirit sorcerers who are still active, she is still at the top. Even so, Janica was still confused why it had to be her. Professor Melina explained. There would be a joint combat training session soon, so she had to uphold her dignity as a senior, but Janica said that she didn't want to uphold her dignity or anything. Hearing that, Professor Melina said that she didn't expect her to be a strict model student, but after all she was still the top-ranked student in her year, as well as the best spirit sorcerer in this academy. In every class, she realized that she kept smiling like the happiest person in the world. It was obvious that she was in love. She knew that she was dating Ed, but it's obvious she's completely head over heels. From the way she acted, she seemed to be out of her mind. Her words shocked Janica and made her face red. Janica's heart was pounding because her secret was exposed so bluntly. Professor Melina was then shocked when Janica suddenly kicked her desk hard. With a blushing face, Janica then asked her about what she said earlier about her and Ed, and why she suddenly said that. Seeing her reaction, Professor Melina asked her if she was joking. She explained, just before this you were always with him, not only during spirit lessons, but also general lessons and elemental lessons. You go to the cafeteria and academy facilities always together with him. Lately, whatever you do, at every opportunity you have, you always put on a stupid smile. Professor Melina couldn't help but sigh when she said that. She was confused about what silly thoughts actually made her absent-minded like that. During class, you always stare blankly at the blackboard and start smiling to yourself. You two are like lovesick kids who are dating for the first time. Seeing you two is tiring, you know. Hearing that, Janica stammeringly asked her to please don't say that to anyone else. Professor Melina yawned for a moment at her attitude. She said that she usually didn't care about who was dating who among the students, but she then told Janica the fact that she had not been aware of, that everyone already assumed they had such a relationship. Hearing that, Janica then finally realized the strange looks that the students gave her. Professor Melina said that people thought that she and Ed had been in a relationship. The news was certainly very surprising to Janica's innocent heart. Many years ago, when Janica was still an innocent peasant girl, somewhere deep in the eastern Spard region. It took 3 days and 3 nights on horseback to get there if you came from the imperial capital. The mountainous area in the southern part of eastern Spard is called Pollen, the land of livestock. If you follow the valleys of Pollen deep inside and look near the ridges, you will find Torin, a small livestock village with fewer than 300 people. Janica Feylover, a girl who could see spirits from the moment she could speak, was a genius among geniuses, destined to bring honor to the village. Sometimes, outsiders would visit the village where she lived. Among them, there was a young postboy who made an impression on Janica. He was the only person who spoke formally to her. All the young people had left the village and gone to the city to seek opportunities. Janica lived her childhood as the youngest girl who was most loved by the people in the village, so she was not used to speaking formally, but perhaps because of her natural friendliness, the postboy soon became close with Janica. The postboy often chatted with her and told her many places outside the village where she lived. Janica, who grew up beautifully with love and care, was the pride of the village. Everyone loved her, even the postboy, who occasionally visited the village. In a way, it was only natural that his heart was taken. There was a moment when the postboy expressed his feelings for her with a bouquet of flowers in his hand. Janica was a girl who did not know how to refuse, but she was too young to understand love, so she rejected his feelings. Janica apologized to him. After that incident, the young man, who left as if running away, didn't return to the village for a long time, and when they finally met again, what he brought was truly unexpected. He handed her a letter. It was Sylvania's admission letter. And in that moment, he finally formally said goodbye to Janica. He spoke to her as formally as when they first met. It's been nearly 3 years since she entered Sylvania. She barely remembers the young man's face now, but for Janica Feylover, even now, refusal is scary, and formal speech is unfamiliar. While Janica was deep in thought, someone suddenly called her, which immediately woke her up. The person said that she didn't even know how many days it's been, but if she had some kind of problem or needed to submit a request letter, she asked her to tell them immediately. If the request was within their jurisdiction, they could process it immediately. The place where Janica was now was the Trix Hall administration office. While looking at the paper she was holding, Janica suddenly stuttered and hesitated to say something. It was a withdrawal application. Dex Hall dormitory. Seeing her attitude, the receptionist was confused why she was so hesitant. She also advised her, if she really felt unsure, she could talk about it with someone close to her. The receptionist was very sure that there would be many people who would do anything to help her, someone who was willing to listen to her story. Normally, there were always many people around Janica who were willing to help her, but at times like this, when the sense of attention felt overwhelming, she had more and more difficulty opening up and expressing what she was thinking, even to her own best friend. Anise was quite annoyed with Janica for not telling her that Ed was still alive and making her worry unnecessarily, but she was also annoyed with herself. She should have known about it when she saw Janica keep smiling stupidly all the time. Hearing that, feeling guilty, Janica apologized to her. She said that she had her own reasons. Noticing Janica's strange behavior, the annoyance that was in Anise's heart instantly disappeared. She also realized that Janica had no other choice. But, seeing Janica's face that looked hesitant, Anise asked her what was bothering her mind. Janica was silent for a moment. She then said, "You know that I always find it hard to say no to people. I mean, refusing someone's request leaves me feeling uncomfortable." Hearing that, Anise suddenly stood up from her chair and shouted at her, "Precisely because you always say yes to everything, you have basically become that guy's maid. If you only accompany him while in hiding, that's fine, but you also cook and even clean for him." In a rather harsh tone, Anise asked her, this time, "What kind of request did Ed ask you?" With a blushing face, Janica immediately refuted her words. "It's not what you think, I want to do it myself. Actually, this time I have a request for Ed, but, lately, we are too close and often hang out together. When I am that close and comfortable with someone, somehow, it feels difficult to ask him for something." Hearing that, Anise then glared at her with a suspicious face. She then suggested something to her. "What if you two keep a little distance?" Janica was a little surprised to hear that. Anise explained, "Maybe it will make it easier for you to ask for favors and say no when needed. Actually, all you two need is to keep a little distance. If you always take each other for granted, how should I put it, there won't be any excitement, right?" But, Anise suddenly felt worried after saying that. she doubted whether Janica could really keep her distance from that guy. She even felt that this suggestion was completely unrealistic, but, if they grow apart, and he ends up alone, then, after thinking about that, Anise then immediately continued her words, so maybe just make him a little restless, create some space, but, when Anise herself felt that her words did not make sense, Janica suddenly stood up from her chair and thanked her. Anise was then surprised and confused by that. With a cheerful smile, Janica said that she had just gotten a good idea. Anise then felt confused hearing that, but Janica did not answer or realize her confusion, and immediately said goodbye to her. Seeing that, Anise was then about to call her and say something to her, but, when she saw Janica who was now slowly moving away from her sight, Anise decided to swallow her words again. Anise was really feeling dizzy with this. She scolded herself for having such a useless imagination, and asked herself what she had done. Meanwhile in the northern forest, Ed's magic engineering skill had developed quite a bit by now. He had also obtained some recipes for making magic engineering items. He had collected some materials for crafting, but, making all of them was physically impossible. But what he wanted the most was, the thunderstruck millennia-old staff. The crafting process itself was quite simple, but that didn't make this staff ordinary. On the contrary, it's an extremely powerful staff, has a very rare rarity. Thunderstruck millennia-old staff has the effect of strengthening the spirit resonance of all elemental spirits as well as increasing the mana efficiency of spirit-based magic. The reason why this staff can be so powerful is because the materials needed to make it are very difficult to obtain. A branch, but not just any ordinary tree branch, but a branch from a tree that has lived for more than 1,000 years, which has been struck by a lightning strike. In the original scenario, this item would have been automatically added to the protagonist's inventory as a reward for the last mission of Act 3. But in reality, he could not find or buy it easily. A tree that is more than 1,000 years old is very rare, but at least, there should be one in this northern forest. The problem is lightning, but, while Ed was thinking about lightning, he immediately thought of something and immediately turned to Lucy who was sleeping there. Ed then walked over to her and tried to wake her up, but, his efforts were not successful because Lucy did not wake up. After a while, when Lucy slowly opened her eyes, she then saw Ed's face right in front of her. Lucy was very surprised by that and acted like a cat whose tail was stepped on. Lucy suddenly jumped up and hid in a tree. Ed was speechless seeing that. Feeling confused, Ed said that he had tried to wake her up earlier. He asked why she was surprised like that. Ed sighed for a moment. He then admitted his mistake and said that he didn't mean to surprise her. Hearing that, with a blushing face, Lucy said that she was fine and told him that he could talk now. Seeing her attitude, Ed decided not to rush. He said that this was not an urgent matter, they could talk about it later. He had an appointment with someone. Shortly after that, someone then came to his cabin. It was Janica. With a cheerful smile, Janica then greeted him. Seeing her, Ed said that she was a little late. Janica did not argue with that. She was about 10 minutes late. Seeing her coming from an unusual direction, Ed confusedly asked her why she didn't just take the easy path. Did something happen? Hearing that, with a proud pose, Janica said that she had no excuse, she was just late. Janica always remembered Anisa's words that told her to keep her distance. Hearing that, Ed said that he understood. He didn't blame her because he also knew that she was busy, so he really appreciated her for helping him by practicing spirit resonance. Ed paused for a moment. He then asked her if she wanted tea. Janica was surprised for a moment by the sudden offer and didn't know what to answer, until finally, Janica just said yes and thanked him. Although Anisa's suggestion was stuck in her mind, but, Janica was confused about how she could keep her distance from Ed. As time passed, the sky slowly became gray which indicated the arrival of dusk. Looking at Mug who was floating beside Ed, Janica said in awe that he was really good at handling spirits now. It was really amazing because it only took a short time. Although Janica felt that it would take time for him to be able to handle Marilda freely, but, she asked, since you have improved your understanding of Mug, your mana consumption now should not be felt right. Janica felt that he and Mug were really a perfect match. Hearing that, Mug humbly said that he really didn't know what to do with such praise. He said that he would practice even harder from now on. Mug seemed to be very happy with the praise she gave, and Mug then immediately disappeared from there, but their attention was then immediately distracted when they saw someone in front of them. It was Maya who was carrying Lucy. Seeing her, Ed asked if she had come to look for Lucy. Maya confirmed that, Vice Principal Rachel requested the presence of Lucy, the top-ranked student in her years. Maya also said that she was shocked when she first heard the news about his death, but it was a relief to see him alive and well. Hearing that, Ed bowed towards her and apologized to her for worrying him. He said that he had his own reasons. Maya also bowed towards him, and when their eyes met, like there was a little spark that happened, Janica, who saw that, could only feel confused by the strange atmosphere that occurred between the two of them. In a rather displeased tone, Maya asked him, "Do you know, as a maid, it is a virtue to always assume a lower position?" Hearing that, Ed said that he understood that, but he said that he would still speak formally. Maya then got annoyed hearing that. She then said, "Then, I'll take my leave. I still have to thoroughly inspect the maid's duties, especially regarding speech etiquette." Hearing that, as if not realizing Maya's annoyance, Ed calmly said that he understood, but he would still speak formally. Seeing Maya's displeased face, Janica was surprised. She had never seen Maya put on such an expression. She was also aware that there was some kind of vague power struggle between Ed and Maya, but when Janica was thinking about that, she suddenly thought of something. She then recalled her old memories when the post boy stayed away from her after she rejected his feelings, distance, power struggle, formal speech. Janica felt like it was the key word to solve her problem now. Maya then didn't care about Ed anymore and turned to Janica. She said that she was worried at first when she heard that she moved to the Dex Hall, but she was grateful when she saw that she was okay. Janica smiled awkwardly at that. She said that living with a familiar friend wasn't too bad. After talking with the two of them for a while, Maya then said that she had an inspection to do, and she also had to get Lucy ready again, so she then said goodbye to them. Hearing that, Janica also said goodbye and asked them to take care of themselves. Hearing that, Maya then said to her that she hoped her study would go smoothly without any problems. After Maya walked far enough from there, Janica suddenly called Ed. With a blushing face, Janica asked him what if they tried to talk formally to each other from now on. Ed was then confused to hear that. Janica frantically explained. This was not just a matter of talking formally, but more like as if they had just met. Not that she felt awkward with him, but she felt it would be better if he showed respect and manners. Ed could only feel confused hearing that. Realizing his confusion, Janica then held the hem of his shirt. She said that she just wanted to try it, at least once. Ed was silent for a moment hearing that. Although Ed felt that her request was strange, but he then agreed to it, because the Dex Hall curfew was not long. Ed felt that they would only exchange a few words before parting, and that's it. But this did not seem to be as simple as he thought. When Janica formally greeted him, somehow Ed's body seemed to freeze. He also felt strange about this. He didn't feel time prison, but somehow it was difficult to speak. Ed tried hard before finally being able to say a few words. The feeling that Janica experienced seemed to be contagious to him. Ed himself didn't know why she felt so embarrassed, but somehow, that nervous feeling also happened to him. 3 minutes later, after Ed made a campfire, the interaction between the two of them made no progress. They both muttered and wanted to say something, but somehow it was difficult for them. They were so embarrassed to say what they wanted to say. Lately, when he interacted with Janica, there were moments of silence where the situation felt awkward. But this one was at a much different level. Ed was dizzy and confused by it. The relationship that had felt very comfortable like with family suddenly became awkward. But the problem was, she herself suggested this, but, looking at her who was downcast while feeling embarrassed, it was clear that she also did not expect it to be like this. He would prefer if the situation passed soon. Ed wondered if he should say something first, but just as Ed was about to say something to her, Janica suddenly stood up while looking at the sky. She said that the dormitory curfew would soon arrive. While bowing towards him, Janica thanked him for today. After saying that, she then ran away as if running away from there and said goodbye to him. Ed could only be silent seeing that. He didn't know what to react to seeing her behavior, but he suddenly became worried. This nonsense, will they continue to do it? It had been a few days since the incident. Under the cherry blossom tree in the northern forest, Ed was seen sitting there while reading a book. There was also Marilda. Marilda asked, "So, are you still playing the formal chatting game with Janica?" Hearing her question, Ed strangely asked her, "Why are you asking that? You've seen it yourself." Marilda said that she didn't have that much free time until she could follow him into the academy. She was just curious if there was anything else going on during class. Hearing that, Ed then recalled his recent encounters with Janica. Every time the two of them met, when Ed greeted her, Janica seemed to panic and avoided. Ed was really helpless about it. She had been behaving like that since yesterday. The atmosphere had become awkward and uncomfortable. Ed was really confused, whether this was some kind of strange manifestation of stress or what. He originally didn't think much about it, but now, he started to wonder if there was something wrong with her. Hearing that, Marilda then got down from the tree and walked over to him. Marilda asked him if he was worried about Janica. Hearing that, Ed did not deny it. Of course he was worried. Marilda grinned mischievously at his answer, not caring about her attitude. Ed then changed the topic, and asked her if he could cut some of these tree branches. He wanted to use them to make a thunderstruck millennia-old staff. Marilda was surprised to hear that he wanted to make a new tool again. She thought he was worrying about Janica, but it turned out that he was still busy as usual. Marilda paused for a moment. She then said to him, "Technically, you don't need permission to take some of these tree branches." Hearing that, Ed confusedly asked, "Isn't this your tree? Isn't this tree named Marilda's guardian tree?" Hearing his question, Marilda said that this is a complicated thing. Technically, what she is guarding is this whole forest. This tree is named like that because there is an old friend who arbitrarily named this tree with her name. But, when Marilda said that, she suddenly remembered that old friend. Hearing that, Ed felt that she must have a lot of connections because she had lived for a very long time. Marilda smiled slightly at that. She then said, "The first question, why do spirits take on the form of animals? After all, I can take on a human form like this. I told you this isn't something easy to do, right? Spirits take on animal forms because animals are the most familiar and accessible forms to imitate, so to take on a human form, they need something to copy. Then, whose form did I copy?" Ed could only feel confused at the question. Seeing that, Marilda then said that she could read his mind since she contracted with him. Ed was certainly surprised to hear that. Marilda said that she took the form of the girl who was closest to his ideal type. Hearing that, Ed was quite confused and surprised to hear that the form was his ideal type. He did not expect that. Marilda said, "Of course, it would be unexpected, because it's a lie." Ed could only be silent with her unpredictable personality. He then annoyedly said to her if she was messing with him. Marilda ignored his annoyance and continued her explanation. "There's no way you can read my mind. Plus, transformation is an incredibly difficult magic. It's not something just anyone can do. I've lived for a long time. Long enough to see Sylvania Academy rise and fall, and still find it amusing. Back when Arkan Island was an uninhabited land with no academy, I met this girl. She never dressed in fancy clothes, always carrying herself in a carefree manner. That was what stood out about her. This form is hers." Hearing her explanation, Ed could then guess who the person she was referring to was. He was really surprised by that. Marilda confirmed his guess. She was the most special and unique person she had ever met. Someone who was able to flow her magic power to the guardian tree, and founded this academy, and the person who entrusted Marilda to protect this forest. This kind of thing he could never know in the game. Ed did not expect them to have such a relationship. The form that Marilda took in front of him today was not just an ordinary scholar or mage. She was none other than one of the greatest sorcerers in history, the great sage Sylvania. Time flies. Without realizing it, night had arrived at the Sylvania Academy. When Ed was warming himself in front of the campfire in front of his cabin while peeling an apple, he was then surprised when he saw someone coming and greeted him formally. That person was Janica. Janica was confused whether she should greet him with hello or hi. Hearing that, Ed didn't bother and greeted her back. He then asked her if she wanted an apple, but Ed then immediately realized and repeated the question earlier but in formal tone. With a slight stutter, Janica said yes and thanked him. After that, the atmosphere of silence then returned to the two of them. It really looked very awkward. After Ed finished peeling the apple, he then asked for the plate. Hearing that, shyly, Janica then handed him the plate beside her. Seeing the awkward atmosphere, without anyone saying anything, Ed was really confused about what he should do, whether they should still talk formally, or just go back to their usual attitude like before. Realizing that the interaction between the two of them had started to be unpleasant, Ed hoped that Janica would soon choose one of them. Seeing Janica who hid her head and did not dare to look at him, Ed then asked, "What's wrong with you? Are you not feeling well or something like that?" Janica replied no. She said that she just felt a bit embarrassed if she said it while looking at his face, so, she then called his name formally and said that she wanted to ask him something, a question that might be strange. She asked him to listen to her first before answering it. She would appreciate it if he could listen to her first and then answer it. Hearing that, Ed could only sigh. He seemed to have been carried away all this time. He then reminded his body that he was an adult. If Janica took the trouble to discuss something, he should remain calm and listen carefully. With a blushing face, Janica asked, "What if I leave the Dex Hall, and live in a cabin with you?" Her question was certainly very surprising to Ed. He even accidentally cut his finger with a knife while peeling an apple. Seeing Ed's bleeding finger, Janica immediately felt panic and asked if he was okay. Whether it was living in the wild or fighting, Ed had done everything for a year. He thought he could handle everything smoothly. Thanks to this little distraction, at least he had time to organize his thoughts. After setting his mind, Ed then said to her, "I'm sure you already know what I'm going to say, but I should still make it clear, though I wonder if it's even necessary to say it out loud at this point. I think you're a really kind, hard-working, and great person. I'm sure it's not just me. Everyone probably thinks the same. To put it simply, I like you quite a bit." Janica was then shocked to hear his confession. Her head was so hot now that it seemed to be emitting smoke. Not realizing her situation, Ed continued, "But there's something I can't ignore. At the end of the day, I'm still a guy. Listen carefully, Janica. I don't know how you see yourself, but you're extremely beautiful. I mean, you're a stunning woman. Right now, I'm doing my best to be considerate and act gentlemanly, but if we end up living under the same roof, who knows what might happen." Janica's heart was beating very fast when she heard his words. She was even having trouble breathing at the moment. Ed didn't realize that and continued to say, "To be frank, guys are all the same in certain ways. I appreciate that you trust me, but still." But just as Ed was about to continue, Janica suddenly cut him off. Somewhat absent-mindedly, Janica said that she didn't mind if it was him. Ed was then shocked to hear her words. Not only Ed, Janica herself was also shocked by what she said. All this time, they felt as if they were tiptoeing on an invisible boundary. Their interaction tonight might slowly tear the boundaries that limited them. Amidst the silence and awkward atmosphere that enveloped the two of them, Janica was then shocked and confused when she saw Ed suddenly stand up. For some reason, they had changed their speech style to formal language. It felt more distant than usual, yet strangely familiar at the same time. Right after the exhausting and grueling student council president election, just as he returned to the cabin, he could finally feel a sense of relief and freedom. So, when Janica suddenly proposed to stay together was completely unexpected for him. At this point, he felt as if there was a voice whispering to him, "Why are you still holding back? Why do you keep refusing?" The whispers were tempting him to let go of his self-control, but Ed certainly would not be tempted that easily. He then called Janica and sat next to her. He asked if she was in a lot of trouble. His question seemed to surprise Janica. Ed thought, whenever something unexpected happened, there must always be an underlying reason. If Janica suddenly discussed something like this, he should consider what made her get to this point. While looking up, Janica then smiled. His calm attitude seemed to have brought a relief to Janica. She felt that he could really see everything. Janica said that maybe she just wanted to escape. She kind of missed the times when she lived alone in the Ophilis Hall private dormitory. Janica herself felt that her reason was quite stupid. From the very beginning, Janica struggled under the pressure of everyone's attention, to the point where she was driven crazy by it. Living in a standard dormitory like Dex Hall must not have been an easy thing for her. Always dealing with people's gazes all the time, forced to smile politely to respond to everyone's expectations. Almost a whole year she endured all that. Ed could imagine how depressed she was because of that. Janica continued, "To me, this camp is, I guess you could call it a refuge, so I thought, if I were to run away, I might as well come here. Of course, this must be a pretty burdensome thing for you. Running away won't solve anything, and it'll be a burden on you too, but I still wanted to ask at least once." Janica chuckled after saying that. Ed could only sigh at that. He then told her, "This is definitely overwhelming." Hearing that, Janica's face then showed a disappointed expression, but Ed's words did not stop there. He told her to listen carefully. Actually, whether he felt overwhelmed or not was another matter. Janica could only feel confused hearing that. Ed explained, "Humans live by relying on each other. Sometimes we lean on others, but sometimes we also carry their burdens. Well, if you ever feel like it's completely one-sided, then next time, I'll make a request that burdens you. We're not just going to see each other for a day or two, so it's fine if we take turns like that, right? We're going to know each other for a long time, after all." Hearing that, Janica then asked the meaning of his words. Ed said that living under the same roof was too much, but, at least, they might be able to build separate cabins. He then asked her opinion regarding that. After saying that, Ed initially thought Janica would jump for joy, but, her reaction was much different than he anticipated. In contrast to her usual initial awkwardness and shyness, Janica immediately hugged him and thanked him for letting her stay here. Ed smiled slightly as Janica forgot to speak formally and instead spoke informally like before. Ed felt like she was trying to create distance again, but failed. Even if she did, he wasn't sure if anything would change. Janica had always been the one to step forward to help those in need. Not all her kindnesses were reciprocated, but, if someone like her sat crying alone, even the least familiar acquaintances wouldn't be able to ignore her. Ed was like that. He then hugged Janica back and comforted her silently. Time passed. When the sun slowly appeared and chased away the darkness brought by the night, Ed then woke up from his sleep. Although he allowed Janica to stay here, but, building a new cabin was not an easy matter. He still had to get ready to attend classes. In addition, he also had to finish his magic wand. When he thought about how he could fit it all into his daily schedule, he fell asleep. But, when Ed was dizzy about how he could find time to build a new cabin for Janica, he then heard a noise outside his cabin. When Ed opened the cabin door and looked outside, someone then greeted him and asked if he was awake, more precisely a spirit. Tarkan said that his arrival was very fitting. He needed advice from him. He had never built a cabin before. Seeing that scene, Ed seemed not to bother helping Janica to build a new cabin, because with the labor of the spirits, it could be completed quickly. Seeing Ed's dazed face, Tarkan felt that he looked tired. Frankly, he was the same. There was a celebration in the spirit realm last night, so they stayed up all night partying. Anyway, they should start building the cabin now. While looking at the spirits who are working tirelessly to build the cabin, Tarkan said that they have finished clearing the foundation land. He feels more comfortable if it is built facing the other side. Waking up in the morning, stepping outside, then being able to see each other clearly, he feels that the scene will feel a bit romantic. While Ed himself is still in a daze at this time, looking at the progress of the construction of the cabin that the spirits are currently working on, he is really surprised at how fast it is. The spirits also feel that the cabin is built next to each other. That would be good, but they felt that it might feel a bit cramped. At least there should be a little space to maintain privacy. Hearing that, after pondering for a while, the other spirit even felt that maybe not so. If it was going to be built, then the closer the better. While Ed was confusedly looking at the spirits who were working, Mug suddenly came at this time and perched on his shoulder. While putting on a respectful attitude, Mug then said to Tarkan that their target period of work was 10 days. As a project foreman, he said that he would establish a cooperation plan as efficiently as possible. Hearing that, Tarkan then asked again for the work time to reconfirm. Mug confirmed it, taking into account the lesser spirit shift schedule and also the rest time. Approximately the time period is like that, depending on the progress. They can try to shorten it too, but Tarkan seemed to be unhappy with his explanation and looked angry. In his day, they carried the spirit sorcerers on their backs for 3 days and 3 nights, crossed the entire snow-covered mountains for a week, then still fought the next day as if nothing had happened. Now the number of spirit sorcerers is large and contracts are easy to make, but that makes the lesser spirits even lazier. All they think about is rest and rest, but the work is minimal. If this continues, when will they be able to evolve into intermediate spirits? Tarkan seems very dissatisfied with their work ethic. Muggs was trembling in fear of facing his anger. He then said, if we advance the schedule as much as possible, we can take the target 1 week, but Tarkan still seems dissatisfied. He then ignored him and excused himself to Ed to do his business. He promised him that they would be finished in 5 days, so he asked him to please be patient with all the noise that would occur. Hearing that they only needed 5 days to build a new cabin, Ed was surprised, because he himself took a month. While Mug himself was now puzzling over how they could finish building the cabin in 5 days, refusing was not at all in his mind. Once an order remains an order. Mug then convinced himself that he could definitely do it. Seeing that, Ed inwardly apologized to him. He had no intention of something like this happening, although he doesn't need to help the spirits too much in building the cabin, but He still seems to be very busy, but at least, the tight schedule problem has been resolved. Now he has time to make thunderstruck millennia-old staff. There are so many things he wants to repay her. Janica has helped him in many ways. Giving him a place to live in the camp is far from enough, although he already had many wands from gifts from his family and friends, but Janica still insisted on using the old oak staff, so, Ed didn't know if Janica would like the wand he was going to make. While earnestly slicing the old tree branch in his hand, Ed hoped Janica would like this wand.